It's always a pleasure each year to talk to fellow film critics about their best and worst films of the year. And as always, it's my great pleasure to be speaking to Jake Wilson, who is the film reviewer for The Age. Jake, welcome again to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you, Peter.
Good to talk to you. And one thing we should be very happy about is the range of films that are now being released, and obviously with the backlog due to COVID and so on, so that people are going back to cinemas. I think that's great.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it's sort of a slow thing. I know people going back to cinemas. Some people are more gung-ho about it than others, but I've enjoyed myself just to see cinemas back open. It was such a long time where, things were so, on and off, and, it was very, very, I mean, obviously there was a much bigger things to worry about, but just for me personally, that ranked quite high. The whole nightmare collective nightmare we've been through this past couple of years.
Absolutely, yes. But now it looks like things are back to relative normality. Now, we have a 40-minute limit, with Zoom, but if we run out of time, that's okay. I'll stop recording and you just dial back in, and we'll continue. Okay, so Jake, your films of the year, tell me about them.
Okay, well, I know I can run on very easily. I'm going to try and keep it a little bit briefer than I sometimes have in the past.
Okay.
But I do have a couple of lists, and as I have in the past, I thought maybe start with the my worst films of the year.
Sure.
And I have a few of those. I have a list of 5, and it came back to me actually when I was doing this list, that I told you last year that I'd already seen what I thought were going to be 2 of the worst films of the year. One of them I wound up giving 2 stars to, which but I still do really dislike it. So I thought, well, I'll put it on my worst films of the year, and that was Ghostbusters Afterlife, which to me is it's kind of a creepy film, but I mean, what I mainly find objectionable about it is it's just so clearly a sort of comeback to the previous Ghostbusters film, which triggered a whole lot of people who did not like the idea of female Ghostbusters. But what's weird about it is that it's still centered on a 12-year-old girl. But apparently, having a 12-year-old female Ghostbuster is okay, but adult female Ghostbusters are not okay. I find that very strange. I don't know quite what to make of that.
Fair point.
That's about all I'm probably going to say about that one. That would be like the 5th worst film of the year.
Yep.
The fourth worst for me is kind of a consensus worst film, which is Morbius. Morbius became kind of an internet joke, kind of a meme, but it is a very tedious film. It's not very long for a superhero film, but it felt like there was nothing to do while watching it but wait for it to end. You know what I mean?
Yep, fully agree with you.
Number 3 is, I try not to have too many Australian films in this worst film list, because inevitably you see a certain number of Australian films that are not going to get released elsewhere, and some of them are really bad and we wouldn't see the equivalents from overseas. But one I thought probably did merit being on the list was Wog Boys Forever.
It's awful.
Again, I know quite a few people did go to see it, but I don't anticipate a great deal of pushback on that. It is like, Donald Trump used to say, low energy. It's a very low energy film. It's, I don't even think, people who enjoyed the previous Wog Boys a lot more than I did would necessarily get much out of it. Sort of similar, the second worst film of the year, On the Line, the Mel Gibson vehicle. Did you see it, Peter?
Yes, I actually didn't mind it, but keep going.
Well, it's, again, I mean, it's pretty low energy. It's like, mostly set. I mean, it's a French film, but it's meant to be set in Pasadena. Mostly, it's a few interiors, a small cast, kind of Mel and some of his offsiders kind of just running around corridors, stuff like that, or these poor young actors pretending to find Mel amusing. He's playing this basically a shock jock who makes offensive comments, and people think he's wonderful. I mean, it's in theory it's like a thriller, but it's not a thriller. I mean, it's not exciting.
No, although it reminded me a bit of the Australian Sydney radio scene and so on.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, the concept. I mean, the concept is, he's a shock jock, and then somebody he's offended comes after him. That's not such a bad concept.
Yeah.
But it needed to be brought to life in some way. And I still actually, I enjoy Mel Gibson as an actor some of the time, but I don't think this was testing him. Let's say.
Fair enough.
It wasn't. Yeah. And the worst film of the year, this is more one that I actually found actively unpleasant rather than incompetent for me, was The King's Man. That was the other film I was thinking of at the start of the year. And I really did find it unpleasant. And really the thing I found most unpleasant about it was that it's sort of turning world history into a joke. On the one hand, it has this whole conspiracy theory about how the First World War was started by Scottish terrorists for some reason, and that's all very well. But then on the other hand, there's this sort of flip where we're taken into the trenches, and you hear this Wilfred Owen poem. Wilfred Owen actually did fight in the First World War, and he's writing about the horror of war. It's sort of a horror like the world had never seen before, and he's trying to evoke that, having seen it. And to do that and then sort of flip it back and say, oh, it's all a joke, it not only doesn't work, it's just kind of, it tells you that the filmmakers are kind of lacking in any sort of feeling for what they're doing, to me. Like, what do you, why did you make this film? Do you have any feelings about anything involved in the film? And to be honest, I can't see that they do. And that to me is just kind of depressing. And there are a lot of other things, I found kind of objectionable about the film. When I think about this list of 5 films, in the past, I guess when I have these lists, they're usually just films I thought were kind of tedious, but these do mostly seem to be films that kind of I don't know, annoyed me maybe politically or something like that. Anyway, they were films I was vaguely offended by, which kind of bothers me because I don't really want to be offended by things particularly. Anyway, those were my my 5.
Good.
If you'll excuse me, you may want to cut this out, but I just want to plug in my computer in case it fails suddenly. I just realised my laptop's not actually plugged in.
No, that's all right. Go for it.
Okay, so I just got to plug it in.
Right.
Okay, so got that part out of the way. So I haven't done a list of 20 films like I have in the past, because that just seems like too many. And to be honest, I did miss a great deal this year. I got sick at the start of the Melbourne Film Festival. I had COVID basically all the way through the Melbourne Film Festival. I did see a few films towards the end, but there was such an awful lot that I missed that I haven't got to catch up on as yet. Right. So I thought, well, there's probably a bunch of stuff that might be on my list if I had seen it, but sadly I haven't. So I've done it slightly differently. I've done a couple of kind of shorter things, and then I've done a list of 10. First, I just want to mention 2 films that I had on my list last year, which got released in cinemas this year, and they might have been probably would have been on any list that I had done if I hadn't put them on my list last year. And those are Memoria and Wheel of Fortune Fantasy. And Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy is, of course, by Hamaguchi, who also did Drive My Car this year. which I don't have on my my other list, but I guess it's sort of standing in for both of them. I like both of those movies, but I really like Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, and sort of urge anybody who saw Drive My Car to seek this one out as well. It's very playful and just kind of pleasurable in all sorts of ways. But those I did mention last year. Also wanted to mention just a couple of TV shows, if that's okay, because
sure.
There's I don't watch a huge amount of TV, but there are a couple of TV shows which were, I guess, just as important to me as anything I saw on the big screen this year. One is Better Call Saul, which started, I don't know how many years ago, about 2015, and is a spin-off, as many people will know, from Breaking Bad, and sort of tells the other half of the story that was told in Breaking Bad. So now we have about 100 hours worth of story, which is in some sense all one story. It's a sort of crime story, but it takes in a lot of different tones, especially the second half, Better Call Saul, which starts off as, I guess, a sort of semi-satirical legal drama, and then kind of gets into all sorts of different areas. But it's kind of extraordinary to me that you have 100 hours, which really does, on some level, tell one story, and that the story has some sort of coherence. And the actors are amazing. The production, every sort of aspect of the craft of it is kind of at the highest level you're going to get on American TV. It's kind of a demonstration of what that sort of craft can be at its very best. And if you're suckered in by the story, it's completely hypnotic. You're happy to go on that journey for 100 hours. I can't say that about a great number of TV shows, that they've kept me going for 100 hours. I can't say that about many things of any kind, really.
Yeah.
So that would be one. There are two other TV shows just want to mention briefly. The second one is Nathan Fielder's The Rehearsal, which is, I don't know how to describe this for those who haven't seen it. Some people might have seen Nathan Fielder's previous TV show, Nathan For You. He's a Canadian guy working in America. It's sort of, you might say, a parody of reality television. He kind of gets out there in the world and, I don't know, plays tricks on people. Basically, I mean, you could say like Candid Camera, but also very, very much not like Candid Camera. He's he's a prankster, but he's kind of seeing how far he can push that on all sorts of levels. He's one of a kind. He's very, and some people feel that he I don't know, he kind of is ethically very dubious, and perhaps he is in some ways, although you never know how much of what you're seeing is real. But he's fascinating to me. And the third show, which I sort of discovered this year, only really through my niece and nephew, because I don't have kids and probably would never have watched it otherwise, but I do have a young niece and nephew. The third show is Bluey, which the kids show, the Australian cartoon, which is, again, it's very remarkable. It's pretty much, one of the few things coming out of Australia which of its kind of sets a standard. And in some strange sort of ways, it has certain links, or to me, it has certain links to The Rehearsal also. Both those shows are about kind of game playing, about role play in various ways. I do recommend, if you're going to watch Bluey, the best way to watch it is to find some kids of the right age and watch it with them, because it's definitely something that is, is made for children, but it's also made for, parents or other adults to watch along with children, and it has different layers and so
on. Right. Okay, we're getting to the best films.
Yes, indeed. Back to cinema. But those three shows, to me, I mean, to me, the distinction between TV and cinema gets less important all the time. It's like, there's the size of the screen, but so much just goes to Netflix anyway, and it's made perhaps for the big screen, but it's not seen on the big screen. It seems increasingly a pretty academic sort of distinction. I also did want to mention, before I get to the sort of top 10 I've put together, I wanted to mention 2 Australian films I liked, which didn't quite make the top 10, but I just want to mention them as kind of 2 noteworthy Australian films, which kind of stand out for me. One is Friends and Strangers, James Bourne's Friends and Strangers, which is, I guess, a comedy about, I don't know what it's in some ways it's a very traditional Australian film to me, because it's about this sort of young drongo kind of bumbling around and not being able to talk to women very successfully. And that is a very traditional theme, I feel, of Australian films. But in other ways, it's almost like a sort of experimental film, because it doesn't really have a conventional narrative through line, and it kind of plays a variety of tricks in terms of where you think it might be going. It's an original. And the other film, which I have some reservations about in some ways, but I think is also an original, is The Plains, David E. Steele's The Plains, which is being talked about quite a bit by different people here and elsewhere. And it's a 3-hour story about 2 guys in a car, kind of improvised series of journeys they're making through kind of the outskirts of Melbourne. And I'll be honest, like for the first maybe 40 minutes of the 3 hours, I was pretty bored, but then it just starts to grow on you. It sets its own pace, and it creates its own kind of fascination. And yeah, it sounds like something that maybe, if you're hearing this, you might think, well, that's not really for me, 3 hours of 2 guys talking in a car. But just think about podcasts, I mean, people listen to the podcasts, which are just 2 people, going on and on, for sometimes like we are now, basically. But people happily listen to this, and, it's not so different, except, there's also an image to accompany that. So if you sort of adjust your expectations to something which is maybe a little bit more like a podcast, it's not at all an inaccessible film. So now I've got a list of 10 films. So some of these, I guess, are more kind of consensus favourites than others. At number 10, one which, is perhaps not so much of a consensus favourite, David O. Russell's Amsterdam. Now, I'm a pretty unconditional admirer of David O. Russell, but this is a flawed film. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of story. The story sort of starts out as a murder mystery, but essentially it kind of just gets wrapped up way too easily, and half the film is spent kind of not getting to the story really, and then the story immediately wraps up. It's kind of all over the place. It doesn't, it's not necessarily as kind of amusing even as some of his other films. I mean, there are jokes in it, but the emotional tone of it is kind of all over the place. There are moments of kind of gruesome moments. There's all sorts of things in it, some of which feel like, throwing paint at a wall or throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks. And all of this somehow has to do with my attachment to this film. There's something very vulnerable about it. And, Christian Bale, who's at the center of the film, is playing this character who is also kind of very vulnerable, who is the third wheel, basically, in this romantic relationship. He's attached to these 2 other characters played by Margot Robbie and John David Washington, and he's kind of always part of their relationship, but at the same time, he's not involved with either of them, and he's and yet he has this great kind of love for both of them, and it's sort of a film about some kind of utopian dream. This title Amsterdam refers, refers to literal city Amsterdam, but it refers to this kind of fantasy of what could be and is not. I feel like, either you respond to this film or you don't. There's not much I can say probably to change your mind about it. But anyway, that's number 10. Number 9 is David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future, which, if you like David Cronenberg, I don't know why you wouldn't like this film. It's a sort of, well, you might feel that it's great. It's Cronenberg repeating his kind of greatest hits, and in a way it is. It's like, it's the first film he's made for something like 20 years from one of his original scripts. And it goes back through a lot of these ideas about people transforming their bodies, kind of embracing what he's elsewhere called the new flesh, treating disease or kind of weird mutations as something beautiful and exciting and maybe, sexually exciting and so on. And he kind of goes back to all that stuff. And in a way, it's repeating himself. In another way, it feels different because it's not actually something so new and shocking now. It's almost nostalgic for people who saw those earlier films. And there's something quite light about this film, kind of playful about it. It's not a film with, officially a happy ending or, people who kind of are role models or any of that stuff. But still, for him, it feels like it's just, it's a pleasure to be here making this kind of a film again. That's certainly the kind of energy I got out of it. So, and I'm very, very attached to him, and I really also I'll say I really got a kick out of Kristen Stewart in this film. I feel like Kristen Stewart has always wanted to be funny, but usually directors can't quite figure out how to make her funny. And in this film, David Cronenberg turns out to be the person who knows how to make Kristen Stewart funny, and to me anyway. And I would not have seen that coming, especially, but I hope they keep working together. Okay, so number 8 is, again, a film I do not know how to sell to people who wouldn't watch it anyway, which is Hong Sang-soo's The Novelist Film. Now, for those who don't know, Hong Sang-soo, he's one of these guys who they say keep making the same film. And in a sense, he does. He's a Korean guy, makes very low budget films. They are usually about people having very awkward social encounters, getting drunk and behaving inappropriately. They usually involve very long takes. Often there's some sort of, you could say, meta aspect, like a film within the film, something like that, or you see the same story told two different ways, ways of playing with narrative form. He does some of that here. It is very much Hong Sang-soo doing what he always does, this film, except even more so. And he's pushed it to almost a further extreme of minimalism. And I feel he's one of the directors who COVID has kind of been good for, because he can thrive on a scene with 2 people in a room doing very little, barely communicating. The fact that they might have to wear masks is, just adds an extra element of awkwardness, which he's going to thrive on. Everything that Hong Sang-soo does kind of works for the COVID era. And, he made another film this year too, which I actually didn't see. So this is, probably the other one is just as good, but this is the one I saw. And, if you want to start with Hong Sang-soo, you might as well start here as anywhere. Okay, so number, what are we up to? I think
7.
Number 7. Yeah, 7. Okay. Number 7, I have Rian Johnson's Glass Onion, which is a film that only played for a week, I think, in cinemas, and has not yet started on Netflix, but was kind of made for Netflix, but it got, part of the deal was a brief cinema release. So does that mean it's kind of TV somehow? I don't know. But to me, it's definitely a movie. You can't say it's anything but a film made for the big screen. It's a sequel to Knives Out, his previous murder mystery, which was a full-on big screen film. And Rian Johnson is, he's one of the to me, I guess, few really kind of gifted entertainers left in Hollywood. Like, he is very committed to entertaining the public. He's very committed to kind of ticking all the boxes of a genre, in this case, a murder mystery, and doing everything that we want from a murder mystery, but also kind of finding a way to make it new, do it differently, give it an extra twist or a few extra twists. And obviously I can't give away any of the twists, but you go into this film with the idea of, okay, we're going to get what we paid for, but also we're going to be surprised. And he doesn't let you down on either of those fronts. And, and also, Daniel Craig as his, this ridiculous detective is just, he's just great fun. I mean, the whole thing is fun. So again, maybe no need to say that much. Number 6, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And this is a film that really surprised me, because I really did not like at all the previous film from these two directors who call themselves the Daniels. They're both named No, they just call themselves Daniels. It's this. I mean, this is the kind of reason partly why I don't like them that much in theory, because they're full of affectations. But I can't remember. Can you remind me what their previous film was called? It's one with Daniel Radcliffe as a farting corpse.
Oh, Swiss Army,
Swiss Army Man.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah. I really disliked Swiss Army Man. Thought it was really kind of cute, over cute, and cloying, and kind of design ingratiating in all the worst ways. This film, in theory, might have had the same effect on me, but it actually didn't. It's kind of similar to Swiss Army Man in that it is a film that aims to combine a whole lot of elements, a whole lot of genres, combining science fiction and martial arts with what is basically a sort of mother-daughter story at its core, and playing out this mother-daughter relationship in terms of a very kind of deliberately bizarre and over the top and ridiculous parallel universe plot, and throwing in everything but the kitchen sink. And as the title suggests, it's an aesthetic of more, just throw in all the elements you possibly can. And that could have not worked at all. But to me, it does work, I guess, partly because of Michelle Yeoh, who is a star, who's a genuine movie star, but also because in the end, they do keep it kind of tied back to this this emotional dynamic between two characters. And it's actually not that usual that you see a film which is so kind of intensely focused on a mother-daughter relationship, and that relationship turns out to be so complex and have so many dimensions that you need all this other material to kind of express what it's all about. Like, it's almost like more than could be expressed if you just made it a literal drama. I mean, what I'm saying, I guess, is I think they earn all that other stuff they do. And yeah, I found it I watched it and I was thinking, I'm going to have to go back and look at this again, because there is a lot going on here.
Yes.
And I haven't been back yet and looked at it again. I've only seen it the once, but I did feel like, yeah, this is a genuinely complex film. And also, again, a very entertaining film.
Yep.
So number 5, this is a film that may be coming out next year. I'm not absolutely sure if it's going to get a release in Australia or not. It's one of relatively few films I saw at the Melbourne Film Festival, but I was very taken by it. It's a film by an American director, first time American director, although he's previously known as an actor. Funny Pages by Owen Klein. Did you happen to see this, Peter?
No.
Did you hear much about it? I know, I mean, it's been written up in various places, but I didn't expect going in to necessarily be as taken by it as I was. It's a film about a kid who wants to be a cartoonist. Like, it's like a few films that we've had this year. It's kind of a portrait of the artist kind of story. I'm not saying that Owen Klein, who made the film, directly identifies with this kid or that this is his life story, but it's about a kid, an 18-year-old learning how to be an artist. But because he wants to be a cartoonist and because he wants to be a particular sort of very almost lowbrow cartoonist, he wants to draw from Man magazine, basically. And he has these heroes who did these obscure comics. He's into underground comics and certain kind of old school funny animal comics, as he calls them, and so on. It's not like the same as a kind of story about a kid who wants to be Picasso. It has a different flavor to it. It is very grotesque, like not just the drawings this kid does, but the whole world of the film is grotesque. Nobody is really that sympathetic. Both his family and the various people he latches onto in hope that they will teach him how to be an artist, they're all totally dysfunctional. And you can understand why this kid wants to be the kind of cartoonist he wants to be, because he lives in this totally dysfunctional world. And it's, on the one hand, it's a satirical film, but it's also weirdly serious about what it actually means to want to be an artist, because this kid he's not a nice person. In a lot of ways, he's a pretty unpleasant person, but he's serious about what he wants to do. And I don't know. I mean, it's a pretty funny film, but it might not be funny to everybody. Maybe you have to connect in some way with the spirit of it. Anyway, I recommend it to anybody who hears this description and thinks that could be fun or that could be interesting.
Now I've got 7 minutes left to do the last 3.
Okay. I think I've got 4.
4, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to try and get through the 4 then in 7 minutes. That means a minute or 2 per film. See how we go. Okay, so number 4, film that surprised me a bit, Jordan Peele's Nope. I liked Jordan Peele's previous films, especially Get Out. But this one I find the most interesting, partly because I'm not absolutely sure what it's trying to say. In a way, it's a little bit like Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's a film that kind of throws in everything but the kitchen sink. It's sort of trying to address the whole history of cinema and what's been left out of the history of cinema. It's a science fiction film and a horror film and an action movie and a western and a family drama of sorts. And it's a behind-the-scenes Hollywood story. It's kind of a riff on Spielberg movies, especially Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Jaws. It's doing a lot of stuff, and it's trying to be both an entertainment, like a mainstream entertaining film, and also a commentary on entertainment and what we sort of think we're getting when we watch a film, and what it is, again, maybe to try and make a film and to try and make a commercial film. Again, a ton of stuff going on. But on that basic level, also there's something quite uncanny and disturbing about the basic premise, which I can't give away, but just the basic concept of the film. You're waiting to find out what it's going to be, and when you find out, oh God, yeah, that's something. It's not nothing, and that's important. But I can't again talk too much about that. 3 films. I think a lot of these films share a sort of element of the uncanny, I guess. That may be one thing which I'm looking for in movies. Number 3 is Bruno Dumont's France. It's about a character called France. It's not really a film, I think, so much about France, although who knows what's on his mind. But it's a movie about a TV journalist, kind of a glamorous TV journalist called Léa Seydoux, and how she attempts but fails to relate to regular people or exist as a human being in the actual world. Maybe again, in a strange way, it's sort of a film about being an artist. I did feel, although I know other people might not feel this, could have asked them, I did feel that Bruno Dumont kind of relates to this character who is, a show pony of sorts in her TV world and is going around being a war correspondent, but it's really all about her. Complicated film, not for everybody. Do see it if you can. How many minutes have we got left now?
4 minutes.
4 minutes. That seems fair. Okay, so number two, I think all the top films for some reason this year are French films. So number two is Celine Sciamma's Petite Maman, Little Mother, basically Little Mummy. Another sort of mother-daughter film. I think this would actually make a good double bill with Everything Everywhere All at Once. They're both very much films that I feel like a psychoanalyst could do a lot with. You know, there's a lot going on which is being expressed but not stated through the way the characters interact. But it's another fantasy really about a mother and a daughter, and it's sort of, instead of being over the top and crazy, it's really pared down. It's on what you see on the surface is mostly a couple of children playing games. That's it, and not a lot happens. It's only 70 minutes long. Everything in it is suitable for actual children. It is a film that parents and children could see together if your child is okay with subtitles or happens to speak French. And it's very, on one level, it's very charming, but it is also, it's a serious film. And this is the same director who made Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And I feel like, this film is on the surface really scaled back from Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which was this big love story, kind of had this epic quality, but I don't really think it's less ambitious. Final film before we have to go.
Yep.
This is a film that played at the French Film Festival, and that's Jacques Audiard's Paris 13th District, which has another French title, Les Olympiades, which is the name of the neighborhood where the film is set. And this is, if I tried to summarize the plot, it would sound like a really regular French romantic comedy about a bunch of people kind of falling in and out of each other's beds, these intertwined romantic relationships. It's actually based on an American graphic novel, but it had the mood of it, the particular flavor of the romance in it is very distinctive. It is set in a high-rise tower in Paris, but it's nothing like the Paris that you usually see in French movies. The actors, frankly, do not all look like the actors you usually see in French movies, which is to say they're not all white, but also just the feel of it is kind of otherworldly. It's shot in this high contrast black and white. It has the feel that feeling that you kind of, as you watch it, you're moving into this other world, this kind of more spacious world. It's something that, if, again, it has to work for you, but if it works for you, can kind of transport you. And I would not have guessed this is a film made by the same director who made some of these other films like A Prophet and Rust and Bone. It just does not have that kind of heavy feeling. It feels like almost the opposite. It feels very light. So yeah, those were my favorite films that I saw in 2022.
Excellent list. We must go because Zoom unfortunately runs out in a moment. But thanks a lot, Jake, as always. Jake Wilson, the film reviewer for The Age, with his list of some bad films, but also some good ones that are definitely worth seeing. And yeah, it's quite an eclectic list. Jake, as always, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.